What's going on, everyone? Charlie here. We have an important document to talk about, and this is in regards to security-based swap dealing. This was released on May 11th, 2022, and it was scheduled to be published tomorrow, 5/17. And what this is a document titled Data Collection Initiation Date and Contingent Phase-In Termination Date for the de minimis notational thresholds of security-based swap dealing. Now, de minimis, all that means is too minimal to be considered, or basically a small position that's irrelevant to be considered into law. The actual definition is too trivial or minor to merit consideration, especially in law. So minor swap dealings. Now, when it comes to this ruling or this filing, background of it, a security-based swap dealer is a term that's defined in Section 3A.7.1 of the Exchange Act, and it is defined and provides in relevant part that a person shall be deemed not to be a security-based swap dealer as a result of security-based swap dealing activity that falls below those certain de minimis thresholds that we talked about a second ago. In 2012, they adopted an exchange rule which provides that to qualify for this de minimis exception, all security-based swap positions connected with the person and its affiliates dealing activity over the immediately preceding 12 months must fall below 3 separate thresholds. 2 of the thresholds are subject to temporarily higher phase-in levels of aggregate gross notational amounts of de minimis security-based swap dealing activity. For credit default swaps that are security-based swaps, the de minimis threshold is an aggregate gross notational amount of no more than $3 billion, subject to a phase-in level of an aggregate gross notational amount of no more than $8 billion. For security-based swaps that are not credit default swaps, the de minimis threshold is an aggregate gross notational amount of no more than $150 million, subject to a phase-in level of aggregate gross notational amount of no more than $400 million. Now, the phase-in period for these de minimis security-based swap dealing activity thresholds is available until the phase-in termination date. The phase-in termination date depends in part on the data collection initiation date, established pursuant to Exchange Rule 3A71-2. That rule provides that the data collection initiation date was the latter of 1, the last compliance date for the registration regulatory requirements for SBSDs, which is security-based swap dealers, and major security-based swap participants. The first date on which compliance with the trade-by-trade reporting rules for credit-related and equity-related security-based swaps to a registered security-based swap data repository is required. And with respect to the first prong of this rule, the compliance date for registration and regulatory requirements is or was October 6th, 2021. Now, last year, remember what happened? Right around the debt ceiling, they can kick swap requirements to 2023. Now, with respect to the second prong, on May 7th, 2021, DTCC Data Repository registered with the Commission, which definitively set November 8th as the compliance date. And then the data collection initiation date thus was November 8th, 2021. Now, the phase-in termination date is determined through a separate mechanism that depends in part on the data collection initiation date and is also explained below. Now, basically, what they're doing here in this filing, I'll cut to the chase. The Commission's order in either case shall establish the phase-in termination date. Alternatively, if the phase-in termination date has not previously established in such an order, the phase-in termination date shall be 5 years after the data collection initiation date, which would be 5 years from November 8th, 2021, putting it at November 8th, 2026. So that's what we're looking at here. 5-year can kick with the swaps on de minimis transactions if they're not previously established in such an order as outlined by the Commission. So what doing? What doing? Can kicking. But it's for the de minimis thresholds. The non-de minimis thresholds should be in compliance by December of this year. Anyways, that's this filing here. This should be published tomorrow on the Fed Register.